Hey, it is Tuesday. I am KMO. This is the live stream, and I have Ed, the Willing, in Montreal.
Greetings.
All righty. So, Ed, we've slaved over the agenda for this live stream. More emails back and forth than I can possibly count. What did we decide upon for the agenda?
Well, usually it's jabbering, so I thought I would help you jabber.
Okay.
At the top of mind currently here is the Canadian election. We just had an election, and nothing has changed. Everything is the same as it was yesterday, and which sort of justifies my decision to not vote.
So we have weird elections here in the U.S., and people in other countries are often confused when the person who gets the most votes doesn't win. But what's confusing for Americans, I think, is that in your country, as well as in Great Britain, there's no fixed date for elections. The existing government can call them when they think it's advantageous to do so. What's that about?
Yeah, the existing government has the right to request from the Queen's representative, has the right to make that request to the Governor General for calling an election if Her Majesty's government deems it timely. To have them make that request, a perfunctory arrangement. And if they ask for it, they'll get it. So we just had an election 2 years ago in 2019, just before the pandemic started. So this is very fresh. It's very unusual. And the Trudeau government, the Liberal Party, they still had 2 years left in their mandate. Generally speaking, the mandate is about 4 years. So even though they had 2 years left on the clock, they made the decision to call an early election. And the reason why they did that is because they had a minority government, meaning that they didn't have enough seats in the House of Commons to just pass any legislation they wanted. So they had to consult with the other parties and get agreement and negotiate and compromise. And they thought that their popularity had risen through the pandemic because we were very amply supplied with vaccines, and probably more importantly is that the checkbook was opened up. So basically a form of emergency UBI was created, and there was a lot of business grants to help businesses stay in business and not go bankrupt. So one of the consequences of this was high polling numbers. So it seems that the internal strategists in the ruling Liberal Party thought it would be a good idea to call the election now instead of waiting 2 years when the inevitable chickens would come home to roost, and like the consequences of all this spending might start to have effects on the economy. So they called it early, but the results are in, and they there was no improvement. They still have a minority government. So I thought it was quite a cynical move to call an unnecessary election. I mean, you're mobilizing tens of millions of people into this activity, and our time and energy can be spent on that amount of human energy could be spent on a great many other projects. But this endeavor really didn't produce any fundamental change.
Here in the U.S., we've got two parties that matter, the Democrats and the Republicans. Occasionally, or I guess in most elections, most presidential elections, both the Greens and the Libertarians will have a candidate on the ballot, but there's no expectation that either one could possibly win. You don't have just the two, though. You've got three. How does that work? And who are they, and how does that work?
Well, we've only ever had two parties that have formed a government.
Mm-hmm.
So in Canada, we have a core group that you might call the Laurentian elite. Just like in the USA, there's that Ivy League, New York, Washington, D.C., Boston, the sort of core original colonies, that center of that population center that first seeded the USA. So here in Canada, it's Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto. And that's where the traditional the people who end up ruling the country, that's where they're from. But what's happening is the West is forming more of a power base because of all the oil in Alberta. So there's more wealth. There's population growing in British Columbia, and there's a lot of wealth being generated in the oil and gas industry in Alberta. So they are also becoming a runner-up, like a secondary group, but power is still centered in Toronto and Montreal, and politically in Ottawa. So, now that is the new sort of dialectic, is that the West is rising, and they sort of that group enunciates the grievances of the what you call in the States the flyover country.
Yeah.
So it's the same sort of tension. But the Liberal Party, which is Justin Trudeau's party, they're considered the natural governing party of Canada. There's quite a few political. I think Mexico and Japan have that same phenomenon where there's the natural governing party, and then every once in a while, they're made to take a break by the electorate, but they tend to come back. So it seems to be the same thing with the Liberal Party, but the Conservatives put up a strong showing. They're the blue side. They're the equivalent of the Republicans, and they seem to be increasingly out of step with the Canadian electorate, because I think we're even in a more accelerated fashion brownifying. I think our rate of immigration is higher. So they have a hard time. The Conservatives have a hard time articulating a message that resonates with the majority of the Canadian electorate. And it appeared to, like, for example, at their party congress, they were unable to agree on a climate change platform at all. So and whereas the Canadian electorate, we just had 50-degree Celsius heat wave in British Columbia this summer. So I think the Canadian population is on board but the Conservatives aren't unable to even come to an agreement on one at the party convention. So they have to do some sort of internal reform in order to like meet the electorate where it is, rather than just based on their principles. And there's a lot of there's a lot of influence from right-wing politics in the States within that party, within the sort of the partisans in that group, which causes them to become even more out of step with the majority of Canadians. That's how I see it.
So your conservative government, or not government, but your conservative political party is too influenced by American conservatism. It really makes them stand out.
It causes them to become out of step with the electorate, and it causes the base of that party, like the actual party members, to become out of step with the Canadian population tends to lean slightly more left and liberal. Yeah.
So the thing that's, in terms of geopolitics that's occupying my attention these days is what's going on with Australia. They had a deal on the table to buy some some diesel-powered submarines from France. And then the U.S. and the U.K. stepped in and said, hey, you don't want those old diesel things. How about some nuclear subs? We'll hook you up. And Australia said, yeah, sure. And, a complicating factor in this is that Australia has materially done very, very well from China's expansion because, they have a lot of mineral production, a lot of mining going on in Australia. And, they raise sheep and they make wine and stuff, but mostly it's the iron ore that they pull out of the ground that China will buy as much as they can make. And so in 2008, when the U.S. and Canada and Britain were really struggling, with the effects of the onset of the Great Recession, Australians were doing okay. Plenty of good jobs, good pay. They didn't really suffer through it. So I made a video day before yesterday, I guess, in which I said, look, China, if you divorce that sugar daddy, or look, Australia, if you divorce your Chinese sugar daddy, there will be no alimony. And you can jump into bed with the U.S. and Great Britain, but we got nothing but bullets and bombs for you, and we're not going to be giving you any money. So it's going to be a painful transition. And I'm not saying that Australia should buckle under and let CCP call the shots in its domestic politics, but really those are your choices. I mean, you can stick with the devil that pays, or you can jump ship and come on over to the devil that pays in bombs, but is not going to provide you with jobs or a lot of income. Income. We're not going to buy we have plenty of of iron ore here. We're not going to buy that from you. So
it's interesting. It seems on the face of it a much more rational arrangement for China and Australia to have each other as their, for Australia anyway, to have China as its principal partner for economic and other exchanges, geographically being so close, and the complementarity of their two economies. I think China overplayed its hand because they started getting involved in internal Australian politics. I think there were stories about certain members of the House of Parliament having mixed loyalties and potentially being compromised by the Chinese Communist Party.
I absolutely hate to say this, but I have to take this call. Sorry.
All right.
Oh, and they bailed. Never mind. Might have been the doctor's office calling, which is why I really needed to take it. But
I understand.
They didn't linger, so... So yeah, there's a nice complementarity, as you say, between what the Chinese need, which is, you know, mineral wealth with which to build the infrastructure of their growing nation, and what Australia needs, which is money. Give us some money. You know, we've got all this mineral wealth and not really enough people to use it up in the foreseeable future. So yeah. But as you point out, the Chinese Communist Party, you know, once they're in, they're not content to just let the Australians do things the Australian way. And what really comes to mind for me, I mean, there's been numerous Chinese businessmen as well as diplomats who have been caught trying to bribe Australian officials. And but you know, more colorful and more telling, really, from my perspective, is that, you know, if you're a Chinese college student and you go to college in Canada or the United States or Australia, the Chinese security forces will have people stationed in your college town in whatever country you're in, and they will call you and they will pull up in front of your house in their cars with the license plate brackets that look just like the ones that you'd see in Beijing, basically just to put the fear in you, to say, don't mix with, you know, the native, or the not necessarily native, but don't mix with the people of this country. Stick to yourselves, study, get that degree, and come home. Don't start feeling at home here. So Chinese government is very practiced at this, but until recently, the targets have always been Chinese students studying abroad. But there was an Olympic swimmer from Australia who accused, and I don't know if it's true or not, but he accused a Chinese swimmer of taking performance-enhancing drugs. And so the Chinese government sicked the intelligence service on not only the Australian swimmer, but his parents. And so the parents reported, like, the mom would go outside to get the newspaper or collect the mail, and as soon as she steps outside, there's a drone hovering, you know, just out of reach in the front yard, you know, just staring at her. Or they're trying to sleep at night and people are standing behind their back fence, you know, banging on pots and pans. Or, you know, they go outside and there's broken glass all over the place. Or somebody's poured Quickcrete into the filter mechanism for their swimming pool. You know, and this is to punish an Australian athlete for claiming that, you know, a Chinese athlete was not obeying by the rules. Mm-hmm. That's just normal behavior for the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, there's no notion of respect for human rights. You know, if you piss them off, they're going to fuck with you.
This is one of the weak points of communism, a communistic autocratic society, is that the exercise of power is often not very subtle, because in that case, they were unable to see the stakes, what was the stakes of acting in that way so ham-fistedly and heavy-handedly, because basically because you're dealing with two different civilizations, a Western civilization, English-speaking, you know, British-derived, and a Chinese, different. They look different physiologically. So you don't want to trigger that xenophobic impulse. It's very easy to trigger it. And if you're going to be trying to woo the Australians, and it seems to me like that they did trigger it. And for me, it's a pick your battles type situation. You don't want to, you know, what was the reward? Just some sort of national pride against this accuser. This, you know, our athletic sensibilities were offended. So the Chinese, they don't have that soft power sensibility to just low and slow. They don't really know how to play that game properly, and I think they pushed Australia into the hands of their cousins. You know, they're people who they feel that civilizational and ethnic affiliation with. There's actually a proposal on the table called CanZuck. It's a proposed alliance between Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and the UK.
I was going to ask you about that. What do you think?
Yeah, it
first describe it.
It warmed the cockles of our hearts.
Describe it. What would be the arrangement?
The arrangement would be that, well, all of our political systems are the same. We all have the Queen as we're all monarchists. So the Queen, it's the Queen of Australia, the Queen of New Zealand, and the Queen of Canada, and the Queen of the UK. It's all Elizabeth. She has all of those titles. And we all have the Westminster parliamentary system. In fact, Canada only fully separated politically from the UK Parliament in 1937. And there's a lot of accord between our political systems. Like even some of the acts are the same because of legacy and we all speak the English language. And, except for Canada, we all have the Union Jack in our flags. And Canada did until 1967. So there's a concord among those. So the idea would be to create sort of an economic union, much like the European, what preceded the European Union, the economic arrangement, and also allow people to work and live in each other's countries. So my daughter could go and work in any of those countries, and there would be a sharing of taxes and a sharing of social benefits, and you can collect your pension no matter which one you live in.
There'd be an influx of people from 4 countries all moving to New Zealand.
It sounds like it.
All wanting to live in Hobbiton.
And the Caspian Report has a very good video about it. The geopolitical YouTuber, the premier geopolitical YouTuber, and he did an analysis of it. And his conclusion is that the USA would be the senior partner in that arrangement.
Even though the USA wouldn't be included in that arrangement.
Yes, but he said that because the U.S. Navy is the dominant power in global trade, and because the units of these are so separated, except for New Zealand and Australia, the units of those 4, they're so separated by vast swathes of ocean. The U.S. would have effective control over the transportation and commerce between those, and we would need to turn to the USA to keep those lanes secure. So that's his ultimate conclusion. So it's interesting to see this arrangement come out, because this new arrangement between Australia, UK, and the USA, because it sort of it was presaged by the Caspian Report video, saying that the US would be the ultimate power in that arrangement.
Yeah, but that's a military alliance. That's not like a European Union or that Kanzuk Union that you were talking about, where the citizens of individual countries could move freely between those countries. That would be awesome. I mean, how does that Kanzak warm glow in your heart, how is it affected if I put into your head the idea, well, you might as well just include the United States as well?
Oh, it's like the brash older brother that's the most, like, because we're all sort of humble second-rate powers now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I would love it, but I think that I think we would be all, I think those 4 countries are well balanced. And so with the USA, I think they would take up a lot of space in the room.
Yeah, no doubt.
If they somehow behave, but I think they would definitely be the senior partner in that case.
But just think about it from your Canadian point of view. Wouldn't it be pretty cool if that U.S.-Canadian border didn't really mean anything? That you could cross it at will?
Definitely. Well, Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father, he said that being next to the USA is like sleeping with an elephant. That was his phrase. So it would just be, the concern is that it would be so powerful that it would dominate. But yes, I would be amenable to such. I would be open to the discussion for sure. I just wouldn't want to become us to become another state,
Hikane in the comments says, I support free travel and free movement of labor between our countries, just no group legislation.
Well, I'm actually very partial to, I think there is something deleterious in political organizations that are too large, because I think when arrangements are local and regional, there's more of a human scale. When you can actually, like, I can conceive of my region. There's a certain region that I travel within naturally in my car, and there's a set of people here who I see, and I can conceive of it in a physical way. But then once a country becomes too large, like 330 million people, the only way to hold it together is sort of like through electronic media, like radio, television, and I think that produces a kind of celebrity culture uh, where people who know how to manipulate those electronic media, and then also the resources that such a large super state can accrue to itself can be quite harmful. So I'm more partial to federations, federations of medium-sized powers.
So, what do you think of the behavior of France in the wake of the shift from a partnership, a military partnership with France to a military partnership with the U.S. and the U.K.? France has been, particularly Macron, has been pretty petulant about it, pretty childish.
Yeah. Well, one is I fully understand why nuclear-powered submarines are better than diesel-powered submarines, because it's all about how noisy, how stealthy your ship is. So, and I fully understand why. And you can't be concerned about the niceties of hurting people's feelings when dealing with, those sort of military matters. But it seems to me that it's more than just this one incident. Like under Trump, the USA was questioning its commitment to NATO, and so it seems like there's more to it than just that. It's more like how committed. They're just getting used to not necessarily being totally reliant and dependent on the USA for like military. It's looking like more and more like the EU is going to have to go its own way to a certain extent. And there's even talk of the EU having its own army. So for me, it seems to be the acuity of his reaction is more explained by that than the loss of a military contract. But I would think that if it was handled better diplomatically, that such a vociferous reaction could have been obviated, by including them somehow, like anticipating the insult and including France in the arrangement somehow, or providing them with adequate compensation, or just giving them advance warning,
So, I mentioned that I made a video where I was basically saying, look, Australia, this is being reported as you changing your allegiance or your alliance with, from China to the U.S. and the U.K. But really what you're doing is you're trading an economic, or a trade arrangement for a military arrangement. And they don't, one cannot substitute for the other. And a few Australians responded to that. And Duncan writes, I mostly agree. Although the reports in the U.S. regarding our government crackdown on COVID protesters, that's a portion we haven't talked about here, but I did mention it in the video that, if you go into Fox News or the other one, I forget what it's called, One American News Network, something like that.
Newsmax?
Is that it? Newsmax? And just if you go anywhere on, sort of red tribe internet social media, you'll hear all these stories about just what a brutal authoritarian, nightmare state Australia has become around COVID. And so Duncan writes, I mostly agree, although the reports in the U.S. regarding our government crackdown on COVID protesters is being seriously overblown for U.S. domestic audience. It's because we gave up our guns, apparently. South Australia, West Australia, Tasmania, Queensland, and the Northern Territories are all pretty much normal. In New South Wales and Victoria, things are a little crazy, but as an example, I went to my state's capital last weekend. Trip to the power gym, dinner in a nice restaurant, drinks at a bar. I've had friends in the U.S. send me messages asking, is it true they're deploying the military against civilians? But it plays well with the U.S. NRA types who want to claim it's all happening because we don't have enough guns. But yes, our current conservative government has been damaging our trade relations with China on every front: agriculture, steel, coal, seafood, and wine, you name it. Scotty from marketing has stuffed it up. And then he continues, as an aside, Australia is now the world's single biggest exporter of natural gas. But rather than us using it here to provide extremely cheap power so our raw commodity exports and minerals could instead be sold as refined, value added products. We just sell the ore, sell the gas, and sit on our asses. So that's touches on some sea realm topics of old, basically energy issues. Australia has lots of it, like the United States. They've got lots of natural gas. You can use that natural gas to, pull your raw ores out of the ground, refine them into something that sells for a lot more. But the Australians don't because they're pretty comfortable as is. But, my whole contention is if you piss off China and you screw up this, sugar daddy relationship you've got going on, materially things are going to change and not for the better from most people's perspective.
It's also a question of how dependent is China on Australian commodities, Australian products, and like how unique are they? Can China get what it needs from Central Asia?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, one very telling thing is that China has slapped a 200% tariff on Australian wines, but they're not adding any import duties to Australian, mineral ores. Iron ore from Australia has got no additional, punishment tariffs put on it because they need the iron. China needs the iron. They don't need the wine. So, if they could get it, I mean, where would they get it? Where would they get the iron ore in the quantities that they need?
Yes, that would be a matter to Google. Where is the iron? But like you said in one of your videos, I think it's not just that the iron is there. It's also the railway lines and the mining equipment.
Yeah, I mean, Australia has a built-out, highly developed, advanced infrastructure for not only getting that stuff out of the ground, but for getting it to a port somewhere and onto a ship.
Yeah, that's just as important, that fact that the iron is there to be had.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's loads of iron in the asteroid belt, but it doesn't do us a lot of good from here.
If you would allow me, I would like to touch on the matter of vaccine passports, because we are implementing a vaccine passport system here, and I know that's one of the issues that was touched upon in Australia or related to the pandemic. But I actually had my vaccine passport scanned one time, and it made me feel I was very upset. I did not like it. Because I had just gone somewhere to use a hamburger coupon, and you need to show your vaccine passport to be allowed into the restaurant.
Okay.
And and you show it on your phone. It's a QR code. It's a QR code, and my full name is displayed on the screen. And much to my surprise, the young man at the cash actually took out his phone and scanned my QR code, and I said my privacy red alert went off. Like, I don't want this guy. I don't know whose phone that is. Like, he's scanning my that's my health history on there. Now the system knows exactly where I was at what time of day, what my full name is, and I would prefer not to be around other people who could infect me, even though I'm triple vaccinated, so I feel somewhat invulnerable. But I understand, why to limit people who could infect others from indoor public spaces. Similarly, I think of it like when I'm driving on the road. When I'm driving my vehicle on the road, I want to know that there are not drunk drivers on the road. Like, I support those DUI checks because I don't like to be driving around other drivers who are drunk and could harm me. So, in that sense, I understand the raison d'etre of this system, but I thought I would just be able to flash like a piece of paper and say, yes, here, look, I'm fully vaccinated. But the system that they're implemented is electronic, and it's connected to government databases. And I'm very reluctant to let people scan it, but with our new system, I won't be able to go swimming, or we won't be able to sit down in restaurants unless I allow my QR code to be scanned.
So what's your impression? How dangerous is this virus really?
Well, let me just say, it's much easier to say that if you, according to the science, and we are told to follow the science, if you're fully vaccinated, it'll just be like a mild cold. So, and vaccines are widely available to everybody for free. So I would say that I do not feel that I should be inconvenienced or society should be shut down to protect people who've chosen not to protect themselves.
Well, the media you hear is maybe different from the media that I hear, but the president of the United States got up on front of a podium, I don't know, a week or so ago, and basically said, we're going to do everything we need to do in order to protect those who have gotten vaccinated from their coworkers who have not. And, my perspective is, isn't that what the vaccine is supposed to do? What other measures are necessary?
That to me is incongruent. There's so many aspects of this that are crazy, because if I am vaccinated and I get infected, the course of the disease is extremely mild. Let alone that if I wasn't vaccinated and I'm of good health and, below the age of 50, it's probably a difficult experience for a few days. But now that we're vaccinated, we should be fine. And if I don't need to be protected, I'm willing to get, because it'll be like for me a fourth antibody series. I'll have a chance to generate a fourth round of antibodies if I get the infection.
Yeah,
So,
since I've had the first and second shot, I would be totally willing to deliberately expose myself to the virus so that I could really have a genuine immunity to it.
yeah. So
But
I think it's
in response to that, Team Blue is saying, well, no, it's not that simple, because there are effects from this virus that will cripple you for the rest of your life. It doesn't matter if you've been vaccinated. You'll have COVID lung, which means you can't breathe except, in short little gasps forever.
Ooh.
And, maybe that's happened to some people. I just don't know. But to me, to my ear, that sounds like, well, we're just going to make up new consequences to make sure everybody complies with our social control methodology. And it seems like compliance is far more of a priority than actually, getting people back to work, restarting the economy, or even now developing herd immunity, given that, as you say, everybody who wants the vaccine has had a chance to get it for free. You can't claim poverty on this. And if a certain number of people, a certain percentage of the population, wants to live their life as if, this is just the flu and that the chances of it killing you are quite small, well, that's their prerogative, isn't it?
Yeah, no, like when I was in Taiwan and China, at times I rode scooter without a helmet on the streets of Taipei, and I've smoked cigarettes in the past, and I've been known to touch my phone while I'm driving, and send a quick text message. And I know the risks that I'm taking on. Like life is not always safe and secure and pristine and without the threat of harm to oneself. But that's what adults do: is they make these decisions for themselves.
Well, I'm not sitting in judgment, but I will say the first two things you mentioned, riding without a helmet and smoking cigarettes, those really only harm you. Whereas, being distracted while driving, you could easily kill somebody else who bore no responsibility, who did not partake in that decision with you.
That's a very good point.
Hikani says, KMO trying to get banned again by questioning the vaccine. Oh, right, I forgot we were on YouTube. Oh, master algorithm. I submit to the authority of Google and the United States government. The vaccine is divine. Questioning the vaccine is heretical. Death to the heretic. Are we good?
I was on Clubhouse in a Bitcoin room, and concerning the vaccine passport, and I will not belabor this anymore, but they said that in the past, if the government wanted to prevent you from getting food for whatever reason, they'd have to send a group of thugs to prevent you from walking in to the grocery store or like from going to the farmer's market. But now they can change a 1 to a 0 on a database. and then you can't get in the dining room. So I am very concerned about participating in the setting up of a digital system of control attached to identity that controls and monitors people's movement. You know, it's justified perhaps by the pandemic, but once you've set up these systems, they don't get put away, they don't get destroyed. Like when apparently when the Taliban took over in Afghanistan, they inherited the electronic system that the U.S. military helped the Afghanistan government set up. Like all these systems get handed over to the next guy. So I don't like participating, but I still really want to be able to go swimming.
I like swimming. Are you going to Mexico this winter?
Well, actually, I got our government's trying to get people to learn to code. So I'm being paid to go and learn to code. So I have a trip to Morocco, but I'm going to have to change my arrangement because I'll be doing a coding boot camp this winter.
So you're interested in cryptocurrencies, and you're gonna learn to code. Are you going to combine those?
I think that's where I'm heading. Yeah, I think that's where it looks. That looks like the path that I'll be going down.
Do you remember? I can't even remember his name now. There's an academic. He's a white dude. I think he had an American accent, and he lives in South Korea. And he contacted me when I was still living in New York. So this must have been 2014, 2015, and we recorded a long conversation about Ethereum, which I'd really never heard of before he contacted me. And we talked about it. And at the time, I remember particularly, in the tech circles in New York, people were just euphoric about the possibilities, the transformational possibilities of the blockchain. And I was trying to wrap my head around it, and it just wasn't working. And then I noticed that nothing really happened. The transformational, magical implementation of the blockchain didn't transform society. But it seems just in the last couple of years with NFTs and DeFi that cryptocurrencies are something other than just a speculative vehicle and potentially a store of value.
Mm-hmm.
So and now that we've crossed that threshold, you're learning to code.
Yeah, for me that's a sign that this has some staying power. The cryptocurrency blockchain sector, in that it's taken a nice long while to build up a head of steam, and it definitely has applications for the transference of money trustlessly. Like if you send I once received a $10,000 wire transfer, I think in 2004, and it took like a week or more, like 10 days to actually go from one account to another. But I've been moving vast sums of money, thousands of dollars, in seconds with the cryptocurrency. So it definitely has the power to bank the unbanked and put Western Union out of business, and then so much more than that, given that it's programmable. It's connected with smart contracts, so there's a whole bunch of human creativity being unleashed around money. But I think we're entering into the phase where it's not just some cute little CryptoPunk side project, but it's got the attention of the regulators and the central banks. It's kind of like the dragon's eye has just opened up and is now looking at the guy with the sword. That's a real moment of danger.
Still zero Matic in my MetaMask wallet hours later. Not sure what's going on with that. Anyway.
Please don't blame me.
What's that?
Please don't blame me.
Oh, I don't blame you. No. Of course, I will attempt to shift the blame away from myself, so I will blame Coinbase.
Very
anyway.
Good.
What else? Crypto. Other crypto topics.
Well, just to say that it looks like the hammer's starting to come down. They're starting to turn the screws. The
Who's
Treasury
they?
Department, the
Okay.
SEC,
That they. Gotcha. Go ahead.
the Christine Lagarde of the European Central Bank made some statements. So it looks like the central powers are starting to pay more attention and turn the screws. So I think it's entering a new phase. It's also a sign that it's being taken seriously because what? If for example, these lenders like Celsius and BlockFi and others, they're offering real rates of return. So you can just buy USDC or any stable coin and then deposit it with Celsius and you'll get 8% on your interest. So you could remove your money from Wells Fargo or JP Morgan, convert it to cryptocurrency, buy a stable coin and deposit it with Celsius and you'll get 8%. That's almost like that's getting close to what the stock market does without the risk.
Right. What I'd want to point out to people who are not necessarily crypto heads is that when you say stablecoin, you're talking about cryptocurrencies which are algorithmically adjusted constantly to make sure that, like one USDT is worth one US dollar. It doesn't fluctuate up and down. That's one of the big complaints.
They have a track record of meeting that promise.
Mm-hmm. Now, Tether, USDT or Tether, is it has a long history of shadiness, let's say sketchiness. There's, from my perspective, there's very little chance that each Tether is really backed by $1 worth of any sort of assets. And this ties us back to China. Apparently, Tether, just on its own, there's so many of them that it would have been minted that it becomes a sort of shadow banking system, which is not susceptible to any sort of monetary controls or any sort of inspection or oversight by governmental authorities. And I don't know the details here, and maybe you can fill in. Tether is an element, anyway, in the ongoing Evergrande story. Evergrande being this enormously huge Chinese development corporation, which is not a state-owned enterprise. And it is seemingly insolvent, and the Chinese Communist Party has given no indication whatsoever that they plan to bail it out.
Yeah, there's a very good documentary on Netflix called The China Hustle. And it's about Chinese corporations that listed on American exchanges like the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. And these research firms would research these Chinese companies that were listed on U.S. exchanges, and they didn't have to dig very far before they found very serious problems with the numbers that they were reporting. So for U.S.-based corporations, there's a very high bar of auditing that has to be done, and you have to have quarterly reports if you're listed on exchanges. But it's not as strict for Chinese listed companies. And so what China Hustle is about is how once you looked more deeply into some of these Chinese companies, there was very little there. And Evergrande comes up as having very, very toxic books, very bad debt on their balance sheet. So what am I trying to say? So it appears that, there was a long thread that I shared with you from a Twitter user named Last Bear Standing, and this is a thread from July 27th. And it seems that because Tether has to find some way to find value to back up what they are minting, and they are apparently involved in China in some way. But I find it all very Byzantine and arcane, and I have a hard time, making my way through all that dross to see the clear light of day.
And you've done a lot more due diligence in terms of learning how these systems work than most people have. And yet there's still large dark spaces. It is convoluted, to say the least. Like, I won't go back to my Matic issue. All right. How are we doing in terms of time? It is 6:16. Do you need to get going, or can you talk for a few minutes?
I'll be leaving in about 4 minutes, but I will just say I'm very much looking forward to seeing Dune.
Oh,
It'll be the first movie that I see in the theaters, like in 2 years. and I'll be going with my daughter. She's a big fan of Anthony Charlemagne, the
Hmm.
lead actor.
And I don't know him from anything else, but he looks right for the part.
Yeah, he fit. Also, my daughter's of the age where she likes those effeminate-looking young men.
Sure.
That
She into
if they had,
K-pop.
if they could go the other way, if they were just dressed differently and wore makeup and had long hair. And the director is the same director who did Blade Runner 2049, who's a native son of my city.
And Arrival.
Pardon me?
He also
And
directed Arrival.
Denis Villeneuve.
Yep.
Yeah, Denis Villeneuve. And I'm re-listening to the audiobook, which has some acting parts of it, and I'm very much enjoying it. I wonder if you have some pithy assessment of what Dune is.
Pith will be difficult in this instance. Dune is it's a science fiction story set in the far future, thousands of years in the future. Humanity has spread out through the galaxy, but it is governed in a very feudal structure. There's an empire and a small collection of noble houses that intermarry and that squabble with one another and struggle and have feuds and there's another organization which doesn't have any official power called the Bene Gesserit, but they have trained their minds and bodies to have near superhuman abilities, and they're running a very, very long-term genetic experiment where they're trying to breed the perfect person. And they think they've got it all worked out, and then one of their members goes and misdirects her allegiance, and she directs her allegiance to not her husband, but the father of her child, who she knew he really wanted a boy, and she had been ordered by the order to provide him only with girls, so that his daughter could be married to a son from their rival house and create, not only political stability, but also this perfect being who could do all kinds of magical stuff and would probably become emperor. And then, into this galactic power struggle, you have this planet which produces a spice, which is a narcotic. It also extends life. And if you take enough of it, it mutates you such that you can see the future. And there is an organization called the Navigators Guild that their chief navigators have taken so much of this stuff, they have morphed into something barely recognizable as human, but they have the ability to use this prescient power to fold space. So all of high-speed interstellar travel is dependent on this organization. So they're another power center. And House Atreides, which is the house headed by a very popular duke named Leto, has just been granted by the Emperor custody of the planet Arrakis so that he can go in there, take his people in there, and clean up after the evil Harkonnens, who have been, just bad business people and very brutal overlords of the local people. But it's all a plot on the part of the Emperor and the Baron, the head of House Harkonnen, to lure Duke Leto into a trap. Except the Bene Gesserit have been laying the groundwork for an escape plan for generations by seeding to all these primitive peoples the idea, the Missionaria Protectiva, I think they call it, this set of beliefs, like legends that they inculcate into primitive societies, that a Bene Gesserit can then slide into that society and make use of these inculcated beliefs. And on Arrakis, the Fremen, the people that they're not native to the planet, but they're the locals. They believe that an off-world Messiah will come, and the details of their mythology just happen to sync up with Paul Atreides, son of Duke Leto Atreides, who has to take refuge among them and becomes this great messianic leader, and who leads them on a jihad. They've changed that word to crusade for the movie, but who leads the Fremen on this interstellar jihad where they kill billions and billions of people who don't accept their rule. And the whole point of it is that, from the author's perspective, is he sets up the first book to make Paul look like a genuine Messiah. And one of the later books is called Dune Messiah. But the ultimate point is, having this charismatic, very competent Messiah-type figure come among you and lead you is a disaster. It is the last thing you want to happen. You know, it's as much pith as I can give you and still get in what I think are the essentials.
That was a very complete and astonishing summary that even I learned, even though I'm listening to the book for the second time, even I learned something just listening to that. The reason why I say pithy is because when I noticed that a lot of science fiction is almost like something Earth in space or something Earth in the future with superior technology. So like Star Wars, you can think of as like a samurai story set in the space with advanced technology, or Star Trek. In many ways, the premise is like the U.S./British International Navy in space.
Yeah.
And when I think of Dune, I notice like there's a lot of what seems to be Farsi. And when the British arrived in India, the lingua franca of the Mughal Empire was Farsi. And so I see a lot of like echoes of the Ottoman court or the Mughal Empire, and like the idea of royal houses, and the Fremen seem very much like the Bedouin of Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was basically like a courtly story with an emperor and royal houses set in space.
You know, the religion of the Fremen is Zen Sunni, which is a mixture of Zen Buddhism and Sunni Islam, mm-hmm. which is an interesting mix.
Yeah, it's a very Orientalist story, actually, but it's getting some flack, some criticism as being a white savior story, and Denis Villeneuve has had to defend Dune, his version of Dune, as not being a white savior story. Because,
but, Frank Herbert's version is not a white savior story, or, to the extent that it is to say, beware the white savior. The white savior will bring ruin. But that isn't made clear in the first half of the first book, which is all this movie is, or all this movie covers. So, to defend against that charge, he's really got to lay out some spoilers from later books. Mm-hmm. Well, hey, it is 6:24. So
yes, I have 6 minutes to get to the pool and show them my vaccine passport.
All right.
I think the health effects of swimming are worth it.
Well, I'd say go with God, but you've got something even better, which is a QR code on your phone. So
thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you. Safe passage.
Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. I do not have enough time to riff, so we're going to end a few seconds early. I'm out. That's when somebody over there you go.